Hi, folks. Robert Quigley here, America's Independent, Washington, D.C. We're on the road to the White House. Today, it's Quigley's Shadow Government, the Independence talk show, as we dissect the issues along the way to the White House. Look for us on your favorite podcast, radio, and TV stations. RobertQuigleyForPresident.com. Let's jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about some main issues of the current times. And the theme that we're going to focus on today is the concentration of American governmental power into smaller and fewer hands. So let's keep that in mind as we talk about the different issues, and we will try to highlight what I'm talking about in relation to what we see along the campaign trail today. So let's start off with Biden. Well, we know from an ex-White House doctor that is retired and served 3 presidents. He told us 2 days ago that it is absolutely clear that Biden is suffering from cognitive mental disabilities. He says his mental disabilities are going to get exponentially worse very quick. Why is this important? He is endangering the country, my friends. This is why we have the war between the Ukrainians and Russians, between the Palestinians and Israelis, and of course the Chinese saber rattling over Taiwan. Folks, if we have weak leadership in Washington, D.C., if we have incompetent leaders in Washington, D.C., domestically, it means that a very few manipulative, smart people actually gather the power to themselves. And we see this all across the government here in Washington, D.C., but it also sends a message to our enemies that we are not capable of defending ourselves, of defending our allies, of working with our allies. So if we look weak, sick, and senile, then that's how we are going to be judged. So moving on, folks, let's take this thought one step deeper. We know that 36 incumbents from Congress are retiring as we talk. We know 7 senators are retiring as we talk. Now, when we ask these House of Representative members and these senators, why are you retiring? Well, there are a couple of common answers that run through their reasoning. One, of course, is they say, we spend 60% of our time dialing for dollars. On top of that, they're wasting their time in Congress, because within Congress and the Senate itself, the power has been funneled to the hands of the Speaker of the House, for example, the party leaders. The chambers were set up to discuss and deliberate and consider the issues of the day, give and take and compromise in search of a solution. We don't have that anymore. What we have in both the House and the Senate is the leaders, basically the party leaders that control either the House or the Senate, they will stand up and say, this is the final package, take it or leave it. Look, party members, we expect you to vote yes, we expect you to vote no, and if you don't do it, we're not going to give you money for your next election, and we're gonna support other people to run against you. So you see, what we have, folks, is we have party politics to its worst possible state of existence. And of course, what's happened is the vast majority of people in Congress and the Senate are wasting their time. They should not be there because they really have zero input into what goes into the lawmaking process. Now, keep that in mind. Let's move on. What does it do? Well, it creates a vacuum. And Trump and the right side of the Republican Party, they have recognized that this vacuum exists. Therefore, they have created chaos. They have done everything they can to try to hoard power. So Trump openly talks about suspending democracy. They do want a democratic dictatorship because they see that for the vast majority of Americans, they're not even paying attention. They're not engaged. Half of Americans don't vote. And this process of hoarding the political and governmental power to the hands of a few people continues with, of course, Trump and the right wing of the Republican Party. So, and we all know that politics is financed by the very wealthy in society, and what that means is they would rather have oligarchy. They do not want to put in leaders that are smart and competent with an ability to solve problems, because their number one goal is to keep the pile of cash that they have. So moving on, let's talk about border issues, because this is another example of the extremes rising to the forefront. So we've seen recently in the Netherlands, the far right elected a gentleman by the name of Geert Wilders. Far right, absolutely against immigration, and legitimately, every government should be focused on the people that are already in their country. They should come first. We see the same thing happening in Ireland with the street protest and the murders and the destruction of property. We see it all over Western Europe, and now we're seeing it in the United States. You know, the Democrats want an open border, the Republicans want a closed border, and the far right are fed up because, you know what, Americans must come first. So this is another example of course, bad government. And all of this is flowing from parties. Parties want yes men, yes women to be the leaders, because the parties are the ones that want control. And we're talking about faceless people in the back room. They want to make the decisions. They want to hoard the money. So we really do. We must bring the age of party politics to an end. Stick with me, because I'll have a really good quote for everybody later. So moving on, what's another example of what we're talking about? Well, we know that Trump and the far right stop the steal election lies. They were designed to undermine the credibility and faith in democracy. They want to suspend or eliminate a democracy. The super rich live in mortal fear of the mob. Okay, they will do anything they can to encourage a government of oligarchy. So far, in a very easy fashion, I hope we see that we've kind of moved away from a true democracy where large numbers of people are involved in a decision-making process to a situation where we have window dressing democracy and a few people involved in the decision-making process. So what we see is the rise of the right. And the rise of the right, and of course the rise of the left, is simply because folks are not participating. So let's move on, and let's pick up a couple of voter questions, which will also highlight the theme that we're talking about today. So the first question comes from Ronald Yeager, someplace in sunny America. He's a very nice gentleman, and he sends me a message and says, Robert, I hear you talking about the 500 other people running for the presidency in 2024, and in 2000 you said 2,200 people ran for the presidency, but we only heard about 2 or 3 people, 3 or 4 people at most. So how do we find the list of all these other presidential candidates? Well, you go to the fec.gov website, and it's there that you will find the list of other presidential candidates. Now, when you look down this list, what you immediately discover is, oh my God, there are a lot of accomplished people on that list. I mean, they've made a lot of money in life. They've owned businesses, whatever field they were in. They've done well in that field. I mean, it's not Joe Vagabond down the street without a hope and a prayer or $2 in his pocket who put his name into the hat. We really do have some accomplished people who would be very good presidents, very good leaders for America, and yet nobody has heard about them. So this raises the point, why do we have this situation? My goodness. Well, the problem, of course, is we have 350 million Americans. We got to talk to 250 million adults, and this is not cheap and easy. We have to use the media, which is radio, TV, podcasts, newspapers, magazines, all the available types of media, both digital, over the air, through the cable, to reach Americans and voters. And this all of a sudden becomes an extremely expensive exercise. So I tell people, I say, look, if you really want to run for president and you know exactly how to work through the media and you're already a really popular person and you know what you're doing in terms of government and how things operate, which means, you basically got to be a well-trained lawyer to fit that bill, you might get away with $25 million. But that's in itself is pretty unrealistic because of the competition and the amount of public speeches you have to give, training, travel, and training the staff and employing the staff, etc. So more realistically, if you want a shot at winning the White House, you probably need like $150 million to spend over a year or two, and that means you're working 16 hours a day. And the whole point of this exercise is you are really just letting the voters know about you as a candidate and your campaign platform. So we have these 500 other presidential candidates, or the 2,200 from the previous election, and they don't have a wing and a prayer because they just simply do not have the money. So we're going to have to come back to this when we take the White House, because we really do need to reconfigure the system and maybe even introduce what we call a democracy tax, where every year every adult in the country throws in $20 and we distribute that amongst whatever the top 50 independent candidates, and we figure out a system where we can curtail or alter what's happening, because at the moment the only winners in this process are of course media companies, and America loses big time, and problems have not been solved for decades, and we got parties with mediocrity left, right, and center. So we are really in a bad shape. But let's move on to the next question. The next question comes from an 11-year-old boy in Rutland, Vermont, named Noah Mack. And Noah says to me, I was riding home from school with my mom, and I heard you on the radio, and then I went home and pulled you up on the website, and oh my goodness, I spent days going through your website, and I agree with everything you say. He says, I just want you to know that when I get to be 18 years old, I'm going to vote for you, and I hope you can do everything possible to win this election, because you really are going to be great for the country. Well, Noah, thank you very much for that a vote of confidence and all the time you spend on the website. And yes, tell all your classmates, because then they'll go home and tell their mom and their mom and dad might just look at the website and agree with you. So he went on, Noah, he said, well, let me give you 3 questions and give us a bit of a deeper answer. So his first question was, he says, I notice you think that Trump is a danger to America. So can you please explain, why is Trump dangerous? Well, Noah, the key point is Trump is dangerous because he's not a man of democracy. He simply wants the White House for the trappings and the lifestyle of being the president. He's all in it for himself. He doesn't care about you, me, your neighbors, my neighbors. Trump is in it for the power and the money that comes along with the power. He's not there to solve problems. He's had 4 years in the White House. He did not solve any problems. And in fact, he has shown just the opposite, that he doesn't have the mental ability or the wherewithal and management style to bring competent people into the White House to get those problems solved. So ultimately, in a nutshell, he's a danger to America because he's not a man of democracy. He wants to be King Trump, Dictator Trump. So your next question was, well, Quigley, how are you going to spread the word? Well, it's through the media, Noah. Newspapers, radio, TV, magazines, podcasts, streaming services, over-the-air media groups. Every which way we can, we are going to do it. And currently we have 700 radio stations working for us. We have got a couple hundred newspapers, 100 local TV stations, and we have a podcast outfit associated with iHeartMedia called Spreaker, and we have lots of podcasts up as well. So ultimately, we are using the media in every which way we can to spread the word. Now, notice the third part of the question was how to end lawlessness and anti-American acts. Well, the answer there is simple. It's not more jails. It's not more police. It's to take care of the underlying problems that's causing the lawlessness. So those underlying problems are that folks don't have enough money to eat. inflation. They don't have good paying jobs, contrary to what newspapers are saying. Large numbers of people are sitting at home unemployed, and they do not have an ability to take care of themselves. So ultimately, we're going to use all the programs that we talk about on our campaign website with the goal of making Americans as an individual, as in a family, as a community, more self-sufficient. And by doing that, we will eliminate crime. So one perfect example of what I'm talking about, retail theft. Retail theft has gone through the roof. It has colorful names. You know, the most colorful is called shrinkage if you're in the retail world. And many of you know, my wife and I have owned dozens of retail stores, and we have been in the product manufacturing world for decades. We still own a production workshop and a distribution business. But the idea is when people don't have enough in their daily life, they will go and steal it. There's no question about it. This has been part of human nature going all the way back to the beginning of time. And we see stores actually closing in big cities like LA and San Francisco and Chicago. And there's stores being talked about being closed here in Washington, D.C., for example. And it's all a result of the huge amounts of shoplifting that's going on. But people don't shoplift because they like shoplifting. They shoplift because they cannot get the necessities in life for the most part. So that's just one example. Now, moving on to the next question, Sophia, she didn't give her last name. She didn't tell me where she was, but she said, Quigley, I hate your website. Your website totally sucks. And she said, you know, I just want to be brutally honest with you. Your website sucks. Okay, Sophia, well, we appreciate the feedback, and that's okay. We can take both positive and negative. The website is actually, there's a little bit of cleverness in there when you think about it. It is designed where you can look at the candidate positions, you know, Biden's positions, my positions, Trump's positions. You can look at policy proposals. We have like 275 audio files and video files on the website. We have a tremendous amount of material that you can listen to, and in the process, you can learn about the Quigley platform, a bit about Quigley, and you can see where we want to take the country. Now, of course, I know the implicit meaning here is you want like that one page, 10-item bullet points where you can look at it in 15 seconds and say, okay, this guy is for A, B, C, and D, done deal, let me go on to the next part of my life. Well, the reason why we do have something like that, and we call that the campaign positions, but the reason why we don't make it so simple is because when you look at the other presidential candidate websites, they are pathetically simple. These people don't put up videos. They're not talking about themselves. They're not talking about the platform. They're saying, yippee, I'm running for president, vote for me. And they might have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 bullet points and say, well, I support this, that, or the other. But they are afraid to take positions, Sophia, because some voters are going to like them and some voters are not going to like them. So it's almost kind of comical that you have someone running for the presidency, and yet they're silent on what they want to do with the country if they should win the election. Of course, most of them are not going to win the election because, no one knows anything about them except maybe they got a nose and 2 ears. But anyways, we appreciate that compliment. Now, just after that, we come to Daniel Pauls. Daniel Pauls is just the opposite of Sophia. He says, I love your website. I love your campaign. Just do everything you can, please God, to spread the word as far and widely as possible because we need you in the White House. You are actually going to help America. So thank you, Daniel Pauls, somewhere in America. We appreciate that comment. It's well received. Now let's move on to the next voter, Natalia Plaza from Glenview, Illinois. She basically asked the question, she says, Quigley, why is a vote for Quigley not a wasted vote? We hear Democrats and Republicans using psychological warfare against the voters all the time. And in my neighborhood, we hear Democrats and Republicans saying, oh my gosh, a vote for Quigley, a vote for third parties would be a wasted vote. Well, here's my answer to Natalie. I'm going to read it here because it is quite a long answer, and I don't want to miss these points, and I want to be succinct about it. So my answer to Natalia was, there are many points to put on the table in answering your question. First, in a tight 3-way race, the winner only needs 34% of the votes to win. And in a tight four-way race, the winner only needs 26% of the votes to win. Now, both the Democrats and the Republicans play psychological games to try to fight third parties and independents. The parties are in it for the jobs. Every president has 4,000 jobs. They are appointments. They come at $142,000 per year in salary, and they really are fluff jobs. You literally sit around and drink coffee and eat donuts. That's what it's all about, folks, and that's not about your paycheck or your well-being. It's about the party's well-being. Never forget that. They don't care about the voters. They say they care sometimes, but the reality is the parties do not represent America. 50% of the country are independent. 25% are Democratic and 25% are Republican. That means that minorities are trying to control the government for their benefit. On top of these numbers, 75% of Americans hate either Democrats or Republicans. 75% of Americans do not want to see Biden or Trump in the White House. So as you can see, Quigley's chance of winning is very high. Now, when we count the people out on the stump speech trail, which we do at every event, we get 4 in 10 voters pledging their vote to Quigley in the 2024 elections. Now, interestingly, the Republicans and Democrats spend hundreds of millions of dollars in their primaries when it is clear that Trump is going to win the Republican nomination and Biden is going to win the Democratic nomination. But both candidates and their parties are deeply troubled and deeply flawed. Remember, the parties don't really care. So in short, American voters would be nutty in the extreme if they think Democrats and Republicans that have caused every problem and shortcoming that we see around us will somehow overnight solve America's problems. The country is ready to move on and forget about the party system. Now, folks, let me leave you with a quote from George Washington 250 years ago. You know, he said, "America, if you go down the road of party politics, it all ends in tribal warfare. Problems do not get solved. The people and voters suffer, and the great democracy falls apart." Note, my question here is a little more appropriate for current times. Quotation, I'm sorry. Is it more appropriate for current times? But in essence, what I'm saying is the heart of what George Washington was talking about, which is don't go down the road of party politics. So, folks, there you have it. We have our theme that has running through today's radio show and talk show and podcast. And essentially, we need to focus on putting smart people in Washington, D.C. So go to our website, robertquigleyforpresident.com, donate what you can, and together we'll make America work for everybody.